Hey, it's Barça here, and today's video I'm going to be telling you why Barcelona should go all in on the Europa League. Being eliminated from the Champions League was definitely a tough pill to swallow, and before the start of this season I think most of us had quite high expectations about our European campaign. So to drop down to the Europa League for the second season in a row was more than a disappointment. And with a chance of winning La Liga, lots of you probably think it's best not to focus too much on the Europa League, a competition that has always felt a little bit like the Champions League dropout tournament. But going all out to win the Europa League and maybe winning it would be far from a bad thing for Xavi's Barça, and in this video you'll hear exactly why. First of all, the Europa League can make Xavi's Barcelona mentally stronger. I think everyone agrees that the mentality is one of Barca's weak points at the moment. In the big games, when it matters most, Xavi's team still has a problem of giving in to the pressure and not staying calm, like we saw against Inter in the Champions League. In the Europa League, the games and opponents aren't as big as in the Champions League, but the opponents are still very good and you can take nobody for granted. If anyone knows that, it's Barcelona after what happened last season. So for every game, the players will need to be mentally sharp. Apart from that though, the Europa League is also a tournament, it's not the same as La Liga. La Liga game can be stressful, but in a knockout tie, a single game is even more important. Playing these knockout tie games is just not the same. If you make one mistake, you're eliminated. That's why there's always some extra pressure on these type of games. And that's exactly what this squad needs. The further we get into the Europa League, the more we will have these games, and ideally we play the final two. That would undoubtedly be a game with a lot of pressure on it. So for the psychological growth of this team that still has a lot of young and inexperienced players that need to undergo these kind of big games for their progress, going all in on the Europa League would definitely be a good thing. Secondly, we have to play these Europa League games anyway, and I feel like just neglecting them wouldn't really be a good thing for the general flow and dynamic of the team. If you're really in a good form in La Liga, would you then suddenly like to lose in the Europa League? Of course not, and neither do the players. You don't want to lose flow and confidence because of the Europa League. You want to maintain a good dynamic in these games. And if we're in bad form, the Europa League games provide us an opportunity to turn it around and get back to winning ways again. So giving our all for the Europa League is just better for the general dynamics of the squad. And that's why we should definitely not consider the Europa League to be unimportant or something. Also, the Europa League doesn't necessarily have a bad effect on La Liga. The number one reason people would kind of neglect the Europa League is probably La Liga and the fact that we have a good chance of winning it this season. From that point of view, it might be best just to play with the B team in the Europa League games and let the usual starting 11 players rest. But would that really increase our chances of winning La Liga? Think back about our 2015 season, our 2019 season or our 2011 season. Did our Champions League campaign cause problems in La Liga? Absolutely not. Barca did great in both competitions, and if anything, the good performances in both competitions just make the dynamic around Barca better. And think about Real Madrid last season. They didn't let go of La Liga because of the Champions League, and there's probably a lot of other examples like that. The point is that the Europa League doesn't necessarily have a negative effect on our La Liga campaign, so we shouldn't play with a heavily rotated team in those games just because of the next games in La Liga. Next, the Europa League will have some big games and tricky opponents, so there will be some big tests for Xavi's team. It's clear that against the small teams, Barcelona are already where they have to be. That's become clear now in La Liga. But against more tricky opponents like Inter, Xavi still tends to get some things wrong, and we play in a too naive way. The only way for us to really improve at this, and for Xavi to become a tactically better coach, is to have more of these type of games. And the Europa League is exactly a place where we have that. This is a point that does kinda correlate with the first point that the Europa League might help us with our psychological growth. But apart from that psychological growth, Xavi can still become a better coach, and some players need to learn to be less naive when it matters most. That's just another reason for giving a lot of attention to the Europa League. Lastly, the Europa League provides us more games, and with that more opportunities for these players to get better chemistry and to play together. One of the underrated weaknesses that this Barca team has is maybe the chemistry. A lot of our players were only signed some months ago, and there's a lot of young players too that have just come up through La Masia. So it would be naive to think that this team was going to have the same chemistry that a team like Bayern Munich has. Sure, they sign new players too, like Sadio Mane, and they seem to fit in perfectly, but that's only one or two players. Half of Barcelona's usual lineup this season wasn't there 1 year ago, so it's completely normal that it takes some time for the players to perfectly understand each other. And for the chemistry of this squad to become better, the best thing is just to play together as much as possible. And for that you need as much games as possible. Sure, you need to rotate every once in a while, but the skeleton of the team shouldn't change too much. The Europa League is a competition that easily provides us 8 or more games if we take it seriously, and that could have its benefits for the chemistry in this team. So you see why we shouldn't just neglect the Europa League. Altogether, I think it's fair to say that Barca should take the Europa League seriously and give their all for it. There's just too much benefits from it that we would miss if we don't. And there are no real disadvantages either. Whether it's for the psychological growth of this team or the good dynamic that we will also need to win La Liga, giving a lot of attention to our European games could have great consequences, which is why Xavi and his players should definitely do it. That was it for today's video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and feel free to share your own opinion in the comments down below. Força Barça, and have a good day.